Okay, good.
Amazing. We're ready to go?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm Gabi Conti, the author of 20 Guys You Date in Your 20s, and it's an honor to interview Kara Alloway and her amazing book, Most Hated, which I devoured this week. I don't know, has everyone here finished it? Anyone doesn't? No. Okay, well, that's good. We won't give any spoilers away.
No.
At all. But to kick things off, so Kara, you were a Real Housewife of Toronto.
Yes.
How did that experience influence or impact this book at all?
Tremendously. So I like to tell this story and take it back to before I did Housewives, because I always knew that I had a novel in me. I tend to be a very dramatic person, so maybe that's why I said, like, I have this epic novel in me. Even before I met my husband, I would say, I feel one day I'm going to write a novel. I took English Lit in university, and then actually I moved to Los Angeles, and I got a job as a private party coordinator for a restaurant in Beverly Hills. It was called the Bistro Garden. It's where Spago is now. And I was planning private parties there, and Condé Nast would have a party every month to celebrate whoever was on the cover of Vanity Fair. So I remember when it was Ivana Trump, and she did that epic cover in yellow, and we did like yellow florals, yellow linens. So we would do like these great parties like that. And I went to the office manager who I had worked with at Condé Nast, and I said, I always wanted to write for a magazine. And she said, well, we have this new magazine starting, and it's called Allure, and Linda Wells, who is the editor, is looking for people who are good writers first and researchers, as opposed to people who know a lot about beauty and fashion, because she wants to take a journalistic approach to fashion and beauty. And I was sort of listening to this. Okay. So they said, send us some samples of your writing. And I went, all right. And this was, pre-internet, dating myself. But I called my mom up and I said, please send some essays from university. So mom mailed me off Hamlet's Fatal Flaw of Procrastination. And I put it in my little envelope and sent it off to them. And they called me right away. And they were like, you are crazy. Okay. We meant like, what have you published?
Yeah.
And we're all sitting here chuckling, but it's actually a good essay. You're a pretty good writer. So I got hired and I worked for Allure magazine, which was such a fun dream job, because there were only two of us in the office. There was the editor, who at the time, there were two editors that we went through and I was the assistant West Coast editor. And I did everything from like shoots with Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss in Malibu, and sampling stuff as products on Melrose. New York would call and say, can you go to this place in Melrose and try these lipsticks and all this stuff. So it was a really great dream job, but also I learned so much, because I was in the presence. It was like this weird high school in the Condé Nast buildings, because the girls from this fitness magazine were there, and they would always wear workout clothes. And the girls from Vogue were so cool, and they would smoke cigarettes, and they were Lisa Love and this other girl. They were so fabulous and stylish. And then the guy from, he was a gentleman from Condé Nast Traveler. He was always just off the plane from someplace. But anyway, it's a long twisted story, I know I'm telling. But I had always wanted to write this novel. So when I did Housewives, literally the first night that I did it, I said, okay, now I have the setting. I wasn't sure what it was going to be. I thought, actually, for a while, I really thought it would be a private girls' school. And there were a lot of really popular novels about female relationships set in that backdrop. And I feel like it's been worn out too much.
Gossip Girl.
Exactly. So then, and there's this other really great book that my girlfriend wrote called The Girls Are Also Nice Here. If you haven't read it, you have to read it. I'm always
That's a great title. I know you are.
I'm always talking about other people's
acknowledgments.
But I really do. It's so true. But that's a great book set in a private girls' school. So I said, no, this is going to be on the backdrop of reality television, because the thing is, especially the housewife-centric shows, it's just all about how women interact with other women and how they do it under the pressure, because when the camera's on, it's just that added level of, I want to say emotional distress, because it really is, because you're always trying to second guess, what are the producers after? What are they trying to do? And someone explained to me today that they had talked with one of the producers of Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And they said, in the perfect world of Housewives, there's always going to be conflict, reparation, and redemption. And I found that so interesting that they told me that, because that didn't exist in my show, because they had a lot of trouble casting my show. No, it was Kara.
You had a lot of conflict that you were involved in, but I don't think you got any of the happy endings.
No, I did not get
any redemption. You got no redemption on the show.
So I was the villain, and literally, I think that was almost a gift in a way, because not only did I learn so much about myself and how, I am a serial pleaser, and I always thought that was like such a nice thing to tell people, I'm a pleaser and I just want everyone to be happy. But what I really learned is there's a ton of vanity tied up in that mindset. When you're a pleaser, you really want people to like you.
Right.
And sometimes you're willing to change who you are to have people like you, which surprisingly I didn't do on the show. I probably would have fared a lot better if I had done that on the show.
Right, because you didn't follow what everyone was doing on the show. You were doing your own thing. I'm assuming true to yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, although we didn't see the full edit of
Right.
how you were.
Yeah.
And you were ostracized for being like that.
Yes. Now I will say this. Also, I did go a little, I leaned into it. Once I sort of suspected that I was going to be the villain, I did lean into it because I got on the show because I had pitched the idea for a reality show to the producers. So I had a vested interest in the show working out because my reality show was supposed to be a spin-off from this. So I really, was saying like, this has to be a great show. And there were a couple of times, literally, it was myself versus the other women on the show. We just never gelled. We just never saw eye to eye, I guess you could say. So there were times when I would sit there and I would say, okay, today I'm not saying anything. Today I am not going to rise to it. And I can remember thinking, oh, I've just literally changed the channel on this show. It is absolutely so boring. And a producer told me they did film without me one time and they were all sitting around a table. And so the producer said, look to the person beside you and say something you love about them and something you don't love about them. And he said, we were pulling our hair out because literally they would say, I love the fact that you're so well organized, but I absolutely hate how perfect your hair is all the time. And the producers were like, oh, come on.
Oh my
Somebody
goodness.
go get Kara. She needs to have been here.
Yeah. What is this, like a job interview where you say your strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah.
And you're like, my weakness is I'm too much of a perfectionist, right? That's
Exactly.
what people say.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
nuts.
it was sort of, and also when, I've told this story before, but when you do these shows, you do a psychological analysis. And a lot of these facts are woven into my book. My book is fiction.
Right.
And
yes,
it's
let's stress
fun.
that.
Yes,
It's
it is fiction.
This is
and
not
it's supposed to be fun and funny and light, but there are layers. There's definitely layers. So one of the aspects is you do a psychological analysis. And it's a deep, deep dive into your personality traits and all sorts of things like that. And at the end of that, when the show had wrapped, you never see it, but when the show wrapped, I asked to see mine. I called the firm, and it was the kind of firm that does them corporately, so they were very happy to send it to me. And I said, can I see my psychological analysis? And the first line was, Kara has a very high emotional intelligence, which at the time, I didn't really know what that meant. So then I decided I was going to do my reality show because after the show wrapped, it was not going to work with my production company that I was going to do my reality show. So I came back to Los Angeles. I landed a producer or a representative, an agent to represent me as a producer. And I was learning how to produce reality television, sort of working under another reality television show producer. And I sat in on a session with Jonathan Murray, who had done The Real World and The Simple Life. And he was talking about when you're casting the villains in your show. And he said, you always look for someone that has a very high emotional intelligence. And I just remember when I heard him say that, I was thinking, okay, now it all makes sense. I think I was meant to be the villain before we even started filming the show. They literally went through the psychological profiles and said, okay, this one, this one, this one, this one. And my die was cast.
Well, and so being a villain on this show, which everyone in Toronto had seen, here in the States, if you haven't seen it, you can see it. There's an app that you can download.
There is.
From Hong Kong, which
you don't need to do that. I'm always telling people, it's
10
okay.
episodes.
Read the book. You don't need to watch
But
the
when
show.
you hear the backstory, you do realize that they really did give Kara a very bad edit, but also you were the entertainment on the show. There would be no conflict, no anything on the show without it. So when you were coming out of that, you had a lot of backlash that you received from people who thought that this was who you really were. So how did you put all that into your art? How did you put all that into a book and kind of use the book as a release in a way?
That's a good question. So when I finished the book, I was a pariah. And it was interesting because having been the villain and the entertainment on the show, or the bas relief, whatever you want to call it, it was very interesting because my castmates they had their own platforms, and the financial remuneration that they were experiencing, I remember watching and going, wow, I can't even get invited to an event, and here they are, brand representatives of this and this. So I sort of contemplated that a lot, and someone put into my hands this book by Dr. Phyllis Chesler, who is an 80-year-old psychologist and sociologist from Manhattan. Lovely, lovely woman. I've spoken with her. And it's called Women's Inhumanity to Woman. And I read this book cover to cover, and it delves a lot into how women interact with each other. And she gives it a name, and she calls it internalized female misogyny. And she says it starts at 8 years old in the playground, and women are inherently tribal. and the top pecking order of the tribe will dictate how it's supposed to go. And these are 8-year-olds in the playground,
Right.
where the top is saying, this is what we talk about, this is what we find funny, this is how we dress, this is how we talk to people. And if you are an independent thinker or a truth teller, meaning if you don't mesh with that, you are outcast. And how are you outcast? You are slandered, shunned, or gossiped about.
Mhm.
So I read this and I went, wow. So that was the whole dynamic that was happening within the housewives framework. And I was able to take that and take Dr. Chesler's research. I mean, she spent over 8 years researching this book.
Wow.
And she was very trepidatious, she said, about publishing it because she considers herself a second-generation feminist. And she said, I don't want to sell the sisterhood down the river. But at the same time, there are some real inherent problems in how we engage, and we need to change the rules of engagement or have parameters for them, the same way sports has parameters,
Right.
for how women engage with other women.
Mhm.
And the more I talked about this with other women, and I would, sit down with my girlfriends and talk about it, the more they would have stories. They'd have stories about breaking up with their best friends and how that was incredibly traumatic because the best friend knows where all the bodies are buried. Because we are inherently very relational.
Right.
And we like to vomit on other women, for lack of a better word, relate to them and be close to them. And women, for the most part, do really want to form, bonds like that. So we tend to go deep diving like that. And one of the things that Dr. Chesler says is maybe women need to get relationships more like men. Men tend to be more middle ground, which is why, you can say, oh, my husband went golfing and, when he came home, I said, how is so-and-so? And he said, I have no idea.
Yeah.
We just golfed.
No,
we didn't talk about
my
that.
husband is here is the exact same way. Like, I don't think he knows intimate details about his male friends, but they're on a group text and they're always sending jokes to each other.
Right.
But my female friends, when we talk, it's more about spilling the tea, saying about every thing that we're talking about, which I mean, so far is good, but I've had female friends that have completely backstabbed me.
Exactly.
That happens. I don't think there's any woman here
No.
who hasn't experienced something like that at one point.
It's actually very common. So I wanted to take that whole concept in this internalized female misogyny, which, what woman has not said, it's such a funny expression, and I've even said it, oh, I'm not like other girls.
Ooh.
And it's such an interesting statement because when you say that, it's almost like you're apologizing for your own brand of femininity.
Mhm.
I don't want to be seen as too weak or too imperfect or too this or that compared to other women within the sisterhood. It's so interesting the way we practice relativism a lot. How are we in relationship to how other women are? And no place more so, I have to tell you, than on a show like Housewives. How am I doing? Am I going to be the most hated, or is she going to be worse than me? And how am I going to be looking at this? So Dr. Chesler explores this whole dynamic of internalized female misogyny and says maybe we've absorbed so much from the patriarchy that now it's spilling out and we're sharing it with other women, and we just need to change how the 8-year-olds in the playground, we need to wind it back and change how they're engaging.
Yeah.
So I took a lot of that information and it informed my characterization because there's some mean people in my book.
Oh yes, they are. But there's also, unlike you had on the show, this book, the characters do get their redemption. They do have a happy end. I won't spoil it too much, but it ends nicely. It ends very nicely. It's a great ending. So speaking on the book and the characters, so you did something so fascinating with this book where you tell it through 3 different perspectives. So there's the perspective of Dahlia, who's the newcomer, and she is the only one that you use first person for.
Yes.
And then you have Sabrina, who is this movie star, kind of like a Meghan Markle type.
Yes.
Movie star turned Earl. What do you call it? Duchess?
She married an Earl, so she became a countess.
Right.
And moved to England and gave up her acting career. And then her husband has a Me Too incident. So she comes scurrying back to America, and she's sort of all of the characters are sort of thinking how do I find my purpose? How do I nail that? And specifically for the character of Sabrina, she's thinking, how do I reinvent myself and retell my narrative?
Right, because she's been shunned by the tabloids and everything, so she wants to claim her narrative. And then you have Zoe, who is the producer, and who is very ambitious into a way that she is set on destroying these women's lives, both on and off screen, because it's the same thing. It's reality.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you choose that those were the 3 voices that were going to tell the story, and why is Dahlia the only one in first person?
So it's interesting because you're not supposed to read your reviews on Goodreads.
Oh,
and
I learned that the hard way.
Same. Same. So I got one review recently, and the individual did not like the fact that I used first person. It's told through 3 voices, but I used first person for Dahlia and then second person for Zoe and Sabrina. And the reason I did that is because Dahlia is like me. I like to say she's my Marvel counterpart. Dahlia's me if I could turn back time and go back on the show and say what I wanted to say and act as I wanted to act back then, 2020 hindsight. So that's why Dahlia is in first person. And, she is definitely every bit the flawed heroine, probably, much less flawed than I am personally, but that's why she's told in first person. But I also wanted to sort of create that dynamic when you're watching a reality show and they do those confessionals. I wanted to create that within the pages of my book. And I thought, how can I do that? I can't have it all told from one person. And then I thought, I know, I'll tell it from 6 people. But then I was told that was really confusing and people were trying to take notes, keeping up with what character was what, because I was jumping, here.
What's funny is when I first started reading, I was expecting that that's what it was going
Were you
to be.
really?
So when I read the first 3 and then I was like, oh, we're back on Sabrina again. Like, where's the rest? Where's Nicole? Where's Lexi? I was like,
See, I would have loved to do that all through, but it would be a very long book.
I
But
think
give
you'd have
everybody.
some people would have loved it. People like me who has like short attention spans would love
Yes.
it. And then others would be like, no, this is throwing off the narrative arc. Like, how dare you? I can't keep track of all this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Dahlia is the most like me, just in the sense that, when I did Housewives, not only did I want to do this reality show, but I had been a stay-at-home mom, raising my kids for over 13 years. And I was kind of looking for something exciting. Like, I was looking for a new kick. I was like, okay, what can I do? So that's why I said, I will do this and I will try this. I had friends that had been on the franchise in the States, in New York and Beverly Hills. And I had seen them filming and I thought, okay, they talked a little bit about the anxiety involved, but I can do this, no problem. Oh, pride comes before a very big fall, because I just went into it thinking, I know what the contract is. I know they're going to be editing me, but I'm going to be very careful with my words, never contemplating for a minute the frankenbiting or cherry picking. And frankenbiting and cherry picking are, an example is, so the frankenbite is when the edit, for example, I was sitting at a restaurant with another housewife and there was an incident that involved my kids in attempted skinny dipping around my kids. Nobody skinny dipped. But I was very upset by this. So I said, listen, let me tell you something. You come after me and I'll stand my own. You come after my kids and flames will shoot out of my nose. I say that all the time about my kids. I'm very dramatic.
Well,
But the edit had me going, you come after me, awkward pause, scenery in the background, and flames will shoot out of my nose. So people watch this and go, this woman is insane. Like, what is her problem? Perfect example of frankenbiting. Cherry picking, we were doing some interviews and they asked me, what do you think about wife swapping? And I was trying to be very diplomatic. And so I said, well, maybe for some people, not for me. The next question. Then they had this presentation where they said the Toronto housewives all discuss tequila. So one girl was saying, I like to sip mine. I like mine on the rocks, cut to Cara Alloway. Maybe for some other people, but not for me. And I was just like, wait, what? That wasn't about tequila. That was about wife swapping. And again, your participant agreement has this golden handcuffs of the NDA. So you are forbidden for giving the behind the scenes, wait, this is what actually happened. This is the point of view actually that, oh no, I didn't say that. I was saying this about wife swapping or whatever. So that was pretty brutal.
Well, good thing you had a good lawyer who was
My
able
husband.
to help your contract, because a lot of housewives, there's a lot of them don't write fiction or novels after coming off the show. And a lot of times when they do write a memoir, I would have to imagine it's very controlled by the network.
I think so.
And there's only certain things they can
I think so.
say.
But, I do have that golden phrase in the beginning that says there is, and I will tell you this, there are no characters on here that you would say, oh, I think that's this housewife from this franchise or anything like that. I cast my book as to who I would want to see. So I was always fascinated by the wives of the Me Too incidents, like the Annette Lauers or the Georgina Chapmans, because I felt like you hear from the victims of those incidents first, as you should. They should be the first people that we hear from. But I was always so curious, like, what about the wives? And again, in conversations with my girlfriends, I would hear them say, oh, for sure they knew what was happening, or if they didn't, that's on them. And I thought, wow, you don't even know these women. Like, how can you say? So I was always just curious about that dynamic. And it was a tough subject to research because there isn't a lot. The wives really don't say a lot about that. So that for sure I knew I wanted. I knew I wanted the wife of a professional sports player because I had some girlfriends that were wives of professional sports players. And I was curious about their lives and what I had learned about what they sacrifice, because a lot of them themselves, like Dahlia, are former athletes. But it's very rare that you have a marriage where you can have two superstar athletes. So more often than not, one athlete has to say.
You see that also with celebrities too.
Absolutely.
I mean, like look at Ryan Gosling and Eva Mendes. Like she takes a back step from her acting career to let him shine, and like vice versa.
Absolutely.
They switch more than I guess the athletes, but yeah, that's a thing.
So I knew I wanted the wife of an athlete because I knew I wanted that. The idea that it's just such a fascinating life, and how they have to move cities very frequently, and what they sacrifice and what they give up for the greater good. And they have such respect for whatever the sport is. They say the game has given us so much that the game is blameless. Like they do not resent at all, but they are also sort of looking to find their place. And they say that's when you win. You win when you figure out what your purpose is and how you fit into the bigger plan. And oftentimes they would say to me, we'll be at events and people will come up with a camera and they'll throw their coat in my, here you go, take a picture of the two of us. And they're sort of standing there feeling like non-people, like, okay.
Oh, that's awful.
So, yeah.
And then, so you have the influencer, Lexi.
Yes.
So why did you want to tell that perspective?
I had a lot of girlfriends who had daughters specifically that were in their late teens, early 20s, who were influencers. And I thought it was just such a fascinating world, how all of that dynamic is and what's important to them. And a lot of them coming out of university were approached by older men. I mean, Lexi has a sugar daddy, and they were approached by older men saying,
and she says her type is rich, so she's kind of like in on the joke.
Absolutely. But they are, whether, would you be my, it's the whole sugar daddy phenomenon is very real. And it's how a lot of people end up paying for their education. I talked to Rachel Akatel on her podcast, and she was saying, like, it's out there. It's very
well. They have websites, dating websites, seeking arrangements.
There's
sugar babies, but also no shade, because that's their path.
Exactly,
100%.
No,
and then you have Nicole, who was a pop star, child star.
So I had been a child actress, actually.
Oh,
and yes, a lot of people know that. So I was a child actress. I was good at tap dancing and performing, not actual tap dancing, but I call it that because I could go into a room and
musical theater or more
musical theater and commercials and things like that. So I knew other child stars, and I knew sort of the successful ones, and then I knew the ones that had fallen off, and I knew how that had shaped their psyche very much, and who they were and how they ended up that way. And then there's the producer Zoe, who is an amalgamation of a lot of producers from my show, and there was a lot of angry penning in that one.
Right. And then you have Mariana. Is that my name?
Yes.
When I read it, I like making sure I'm like saying it right. It's like Mariana. In my head. Yes.
So she is the CEO of a sex toy company, and I wanted a CEO. I wanted a very powerful CEO, but I wanted her company not to be like the run of the mill type company. So I decided she was going to be CEO of a sex toy company. And it's funny because my husband and my kids are passionate fisher people. They fish all the time, and I think my husband discovered that one of the companies that makes fishing lures also, because it's plastics, they also manufacture a lot of sex toys.
Why not?
So I was thinking, oh, very interesting. Okay.
It's kind of like how, was it Yamaha makes pianos and motorcycles?
Yes.
And you're like, how are those?
Exactly. How are those two gel?
And then you all have Sabrina's sister,
Budgie,
because I never knew how to pronounce that when I
who
was
is
reading.
Budgie, an older Broadway producer who I just needed a voice of reason to go through the arc of the story, and she very much is the voice of reason.
Yeah, very much so. And so you have, even though this is fiction, you have some nods to your Real Housewife of Toronto. You have the cheese flown in from Italy at Sabrina's dinner party. You have the plastic surgery party that was in the first episode of Real Housewives of Toronto. You have the banana boat incident with a broken rib, which is even worse. Well, I won't spoil it. So you have that. And then this is kind of a spoiler, but I feel like it's worth mentioning because we won't get into specifics if you haven't read it yet. But there is a discovery of an iPad that when you read it, you're like, this has to be fiction. There's no way this is based on reality. But you told me that is
absolutely 100% based on reality. And it was my son that found an unlocked iPad. and lots of information from production on this iPad specifically about myself. And I just remember reading it and thinking, like, how? I thought it's funny because a lot of the discussion about this reality reckoning and how the contracts of reality shows need to be revamped have focused around, the contract and the participant contract. And when I look at it, like, I think, well, no, we were an ensemble. We were a group making an entertaining show. And I was in for a pound, in for a penny. Let's go. Let's make this the best, most entertaining show, which is why I said when I found out I was going to be the villain, I leaned into it.
Right.
And said, okay, I'll be your villain. You need a villain, I'll be the best, most annoying villain you can have. I did a really good job.
You did.
Oh my gosh. When you say the cheese flown in from Italy, I remember I was so upset at the women for wanting to go skinny dipping when my kids were setting off fireworks. And I was like, and I flew cheese in from Italy. And when I watched that, I go, so what?
But it's funny because in that scene, Sabrina has this dinner party, and you write in saying, "Oh God, the food was incredible. It was the best meal ever. I heard the cheese was flown from Italy," and it's like, but that's like, it's nice that having the structure of fiction where it's almost cathartic in a way, where you can,
really
like, as you said with Dahlia, that you're putting in what you wish you said, and how you're able to do that with these scenes. So that just has to be incredible.
So I think with this reality reckoning and, how are we going to sort out, I think that the biggest thing for me is there needs to be some sort of either accountability or governing. So when I was filming Housewives, I broke 2 ribs during filming, and I was getting a ton of pressure from production. Keep going, you got to keep going. I was on Percocet. I did one scene where I make an apology with a sling. I was like drugged out of my mind on Percocet. I have to tell you, I have barely any recollection about that. My husband said, it'll be cute if you have your arm in a sling like an Hermes scarf. And it killed to do that. And afterwards, someone was like, you didn't break your ribs because you could never have had your arm in a sling. And I wanted to go, actually, it killed to have my arm in a sling. I didn't want it in a sling. But who was there on set saying, no, you don't have to film? And you have to understand the people that control your edit are the people that are saying, please do this for production, please film. So you're keenly aware of that and you don't want to annoy them. So when they're saying, Kara, could you just say, when you have a fabulous life and lots of money, everyone wants to be your friend. I remember when they asked me to say that line, and I went, no, I'd never say that. And they said, no, can you just say it for us now? And I was like, oh, sure, okay, I take direction very well. I was a child actor, sure. When you have a fabulous life and lots of money, everyone wants to be your friend. And I threw in the quotes for good measure, delivering the line perfectly. Now I watch that back and I go, oh my God, it's so distasteful. Why did I say that? But I can't explain it except to say I've talked to other reality television show participants who say it's just the amalgamation of the emotional distress you're under. You are keenly aware you're being filmed, so you want to look good on camera. So say you and I are having this conversation. I want to look nice. I want my best side for the camera. Then say you throw like a ringer question at me. It's like improvisation. I can't go, don't ask that. Right. So I have to go with the flow. Let's go with it. And how is this going to play out? So it's a lot of anxiety. And the recommendations or the reviews that I have from other housewives that I've spoken with said, you nailed capturing that anxiety that nobody, unless they have been a participant in a reality television show, could possibly understand, because it is, ask my husband, ask my family. I was a raving lunatic. Afterwards I just had to be quiet and think like, oh my gosh, I just have to be quiet for a bit and go away now. I was just...
Well, you have crazy schedules, right?
Yeah.
Shoots when they're filming as long as they can. They're also giving you a lot of alcohol. That's like, they need that,
completely. Right? Drugs and alcohol. I say in my book, the greatest gift the gods ever gave to reality television are drugs and alcohol.
And the stress of being in uncomfortable situations. And also, they were not all your friends to begin with.
No, our lives had not intersected before filming. They had a really tough time casting the show in Toronto. Torontonians are very conservative. We like our skeletons far in the back of our closet. So it was tough. And I was trying to help them, and I was recommending friends. And they would come back and say either no, they have no interest in the participant agreement, or they don't have you have to have that TVQ.
Right.
So, they found people that had the TVQ. It's just they happen to not be friends of mine. And they actually cast 3 very close friends, which to me was like casting one character.
Oh.
Because think about it, if you're doing a reality show with your if you're doing a show with your friends, you're not going to sell them down the river. When the camera's cut, you might say, okay, what were you talking about?
Right.
But you're not going to do that on camera. And in terms of the length of filming, a lunch that might be 5 minutes takes us 3 hours to film, because they want to take in all the different angles and all of that stuff. Plus I had, when we were filming, because they wanted to capture certain moments. So you say you and I are talking, a producer would come up on this side of you with the phone and show you that phone.
Which you have in the book.
Yes.
Yeah.
And say, you need to hit these beats.
Oh my
And I'd be like, wait, if we're doing scripted, can I have a script,
Yeah.
please? What are the beats?
And you wouldn't get one?
Oh no, not at all.
Oh my
So then the
goodness.
individual would turn around and continue in the scene, and I'd be like, well, as I said, you can't. If people would say, like, why did you say that? Why didn't you just walk away? You don't do that, and you don't want to really annoy the people who are controlling your edit. I mean, at the end of the day, they control the edit.
But you did. So to go back to this iPad that you found, what was on that iPad?
So it was their detailed plan of how they were going to portray me. They referred to me as the special snowflake. And it was a producer who said, what were his words? He said, they were talking about how I was not going to be attending a party because my ribs were broken. And he said, this is great because everybody else is going to be there. And then they're going to reveal that she's not there. And there's going to be a chorus of boos for our perfect and special snowflake. It's a dream I have, a fantasy. I know I'm sick, but it's what I'm hoping for. And I just remember reading that and going, wait, like, it's almost like if you were in a corporate setting.
Right.
Wait, but my manager and I, we're supposed to be working for a common goal, not to like sell me down the river. What the heck is this? So the only thing I had control of, I had control of nothing, but the only thing I did have control of at the time was my social media. So I said, okay, goodbye. And I went private on Twitter, private on Instagram, and the shows really thrive with that arguing back and forth on social media. So I kept that as my own. I said, okay, I know I'm going under the bus, but at least I will have that.
So are you happy that because like even though doing that, sometimes you do see villains, they blow up on social media. But because like, that I've heard that even any comment that you get on a post, whether it's bad or good, is good for your engagement.
But no, because you have to think about it when you're the villain. Your mental health. I had people writing things like, I hope your husband leaves you and your kids get cancer and die. Literally, someone would think that and then write that. Like, I just thought, wow, can't you separate fact from fiction? Like, what the heck? But also, you have to understand the villain, and this is what the whole Vanderpump Scandal thing is talking about. The villain gets no endorsements. I have co-stars who have speaking engagements for $10,000 and $20,000. Nobody wants the villain to speak. We don't want to hear from you. You're a terrible person. You're this. I never got that round of redemption, right? I was like, wait, where's the redemption? Where's the chance to tell my story and say, no, this didn't happen, this didn't happen, this didn't happen. That never happened. But I thought, you know what? The power of the pen. I'm going to write a book and I'm going to peel back the curtain. And it's not an attack on reality television. I like to think of it, it's holding up a mirror to reality television, saying, okay, this is a little bit more of what's going on. And maybe when you watch it, you can still be entertained, because I don't think people should stop being entertained by it. But maybe in the back of your head, you can have that running monologue going. But I understand the purpose of this is to entertain me. It's like in the olden days when they had soap operas, people would write to the actress that played Erica Kane and just scathing letters because they could not separate that this was a soap opera and that actress was not, I can't think of what her name is right now, but that she was not that horrible person. It's sort of the same thing. When you see these shows, you have to understand, I'm not waking up in the morning with a camera crew standing at the end of my bed. I had to shoot a scene, a morning scene in my bathrobe. Well, I answered the door in my shorts and t-shirt, brought everybody in, said, go upstairs and set up. Then I went upstairs, I changed into my bathrobe, I get into the bed. Okay, let's do it. And it is like an improv. The director says, this is where we're starting. This is where we want to end. Go. And you go, and you're playing either with another person or by yourself. And, you sort of have to go with the flow. So the process of writing this book, of putting this book together, what was your first draft like? How were you initially going to tell the story, and how did that change from the book that we have now here? Well, it's actually funny. When I did the first draft, I remember I showed it to someone and they said, this is a horror story. Nobody wants to read this. This is awful. Oh my goodness. Like, really? Because I lived it. Okay. But again, fiction. But no, so I did lighten it up a lot, and I had to trim it in a lot. And it's funny because somebody said to me, there needs to be something at stake. You need something at stake. So that was how I got the format. The book opens with someone's taking an ambulance ride, and you sort of try to figure out through the course of the narrative, who is it that's in the ambulance? Because it could be any one of a number of people for any one of a number of reasons. Your White Lotus. Yes, my White Lotus, because when they said there needs to be something at stake, it happened that I was watching season 1 of White Lotus, and I remember the husband is there at the airport, and there's the body bag getting on the plane, and you don't know who it is. And so I thought, okay, let's have someone take an ambulance ride and we're going to figure out who that is while we peel back the layers and hear the narratives of each of these women and how much they have at stake. Because it is true that I think that's part of what contributes to the tension on a reality television show is people do it because they have something at stake. I mean, you look at the woman, Erica Jane, who, you know, her husband was on trial and she had a lot at stake there. That's what sparks the fire and, you know, makes it really intense.
But she's still doing her residency in Vegas.
Yes.
So don't worry. She's
Don't cry
okay.
for her.
She's okay. But so yeah, and then also thinking about where the book ended, right? If you were to think about where these characters would end up, you know, a couple of years from now, where do you see all their lives going?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. I would hope, like, well, it's hard for me to say without
you don't want to spoil
spoilers.
anything.
So,
well, I do. Okay. Well, I know when you were first writing this book was much longer
yes,
than it is now.
It was. It started with a lot of the preamble as to how much more I went into detail of how they arrived there. Because again, now when I watch a reality television show, my arrival on Real Housewives of Toronto, I thought was like such a windy road. So I'm very interested to think, like, how did these people decide, I want to go on a reality television show to tell my story? So I went into the preamble of their lives, which I would say if I did a second book, it would be a prequel. And specifically Lexi. I'd like to talk about Lexi in her university career and how she ended up. Because again, like I say, this whole influencer, the young people are so eager to make a lot of money fast.
Yes.
So
because they want to retire early.
Yeah,
which is
and
smart.
they want to enjoy their lives. I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all.
Yeah, they don't want to work. That's amazing. So would you ever, so the prequel is an idea, but what about doing different books for each of the characters?
Oh, that might be interesting.
Would you do that?
Oh, great idea.
There you go.
Okay, thank you for that. I could.
And also other iterations of it, adapting this into a movie or a TV show.
I think that would be interesting. And somebody said to me, oh, but it's already been done, you know, Unreal and all of that. But I think that this is very different because, again, I have to say, first of all, I'm only peeling back the curtain into reality television show. I'm not throwing it under reality television. I'm not throwing it under the bus because I consider it entertainment in the purest form.
Right.
It scratches an itch. It gets an emotional reaction from us. So it meets all the definitions of what pure art is. I do consider it art. And I look at someone like an Alex Baskin, whatever Bethany Frankel is saying about him, let me tell you, that man is an artist. The way he edited this season of Vanderpump Rules and he used music, he didn't have to manufacture the reality, he augmented it.
Right.
He used music, he used a camera angle to turn our heads and say, look at how these two are looking at each other. You know, he really is a great artist in how he puts it together. Same with, that's why I was so interested to hear about Salt Lake City. I think the producers of Salt Lake City do a phenomenal job. I think that this is art, and if done well, I think it is very entertaining.
Yeah, well, people are saying that the editing in Vanderpump Rules last season is like comedic gold.
Yes.
That it's like they must have a comedy background.
Right?
It's just so funny.
It really is.
It really is. Well, it's interesting that you brought up Unreal though, because I know from at first glance, people might compare it, but I feel like Unreal is more from the perspective of the producer and only the producer and only the people behind the scenes. We don't really get to see what's going through the minds of the contestants, which I think your book does, and also your background can speak to that a lot more.
Exactly. Yeah, I think Sarah Gertrude Shapiro did an amazing job.
It's incredible
with Unreal.
show. Great show.
So good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I wanted to say, I don't think that, you know, maybe I am in a very unique position because I don't think that you hear a lot of that from the perspective of the reality show participants, the ones who have literally, my husband likes to say, you are the pig in the bacon and egg breakfast, right? Like you're fully committed. You're there.
Goodness.
There's no going back.
There's no going back at all. I love it. Does anyone have any questions to open it up about the book for Kara? We talked a lot. I know. I'm trying to like. We could keep talking. We could definitely keep talking, but I want to make sure if anyone has any questions. And so, what's next for you? So, you think possibly adapting this into something?
I think definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
I see it as a limited series.
Who would star?
I love Aubrey Plaza. I know she's like so big and having such a moment, but I would love to see her as a Dahlia type character. I don't really know about the other characters. I mean, I don't even really want to put any
Expectations
on that. Actually, there's so many. I mean, I just finished watching season 2 of White Lotus, and I am just so impressed with the storytelling and the acting, and then standing back and looking at the commentary on that. Like in the perfect world, I'd love a limited series like that to be able to get all of that out of it.
Oh, with Jennifer Coolidge, I mean, it would change. You'd have to rewrite one of your characters she's so perfectly like aloof.
She's a little too old for Budgie, but she is so.
Or you could make Budgie older, and you could make her that character.
Completely.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah,
that's so funny.
So talented.
So you have the book, and then you're also working on some other projects. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So after I finished this, as I said, I did get an agent to represent me for reality television production, and I have 2 shows that are in pre-production. One is my charity show that eventually got made. Dallas is the fundraising capital of the world, so we decided to do it out of Dallas. It's called Dallas Planners Club, and it's a look behind the scenes at high-end charity event planners in Dallas, and how they're all this very small circle. And it's got that sweet and sour because they're doing everything in the name of charity, but there's a lot of, they show up at each other's events and they want to like try and get the clients away from them and whatnot. And there's a lot of organic conflict that goes on in the kitchen when you're making a rubber chicken dinner for 1,000 people and whatnot. Like, how do you?
I just got flashbacks from like eating wedding food.
Yes, exactly. So there's a lot of dimensions to that. I say it's like a little bit like $1 Million Listing meets My Sweet 16, because these event planners have to have the skills of army generals. They have to know in the seating charts, make sure, especially in areas, pockets of Dallas where the social scene is so intense. They were saying, like, you can't sit this one's ex-husband by this one or this one. Wow. And sometimes the mistress is there with someone else. And I was like, wow, how can we capture all of that on reality television? Because wouldn't that be great? Yeah. So there's that. And then the other show that I have is called Extreme Foodies, and it's a group of mild-mannered, ordinary people who have regular jobs by day, but they are experts at the science and history of food. So they will call each other up on the weekend and say, hey, I got a reservation at this great restaurant, or we're going to where the Reuben sandwich, it's somewhere in Middle America, I can't remember where, but where the Reuben sandwich.
Nebraska.
Is it Nebraska? Okay, it is Nebraska. I was going to say, and where the Reuben sandwich was first invented, or Buffalo for chicken wings. Yeah. And they know all about the science, like that it needs to be cooked at this temperature, and these are the variations on it. And so they will go there. So for example, if they're doing a food group like that, they will go to, for example, Nebraska, and they will eat every Reuben sandwich, not in the name of gluttony, like they just take a bite,
right? But
to talk about it and to compare it and to educate.
It's almost like wine tasting or sommeliers, but for food.
It is. Yeah. And then they go back to their normal jobs again. We did first sizzle reel, we did tacos. We went to Tijuana.
Oh my goodness.
We did something like 48 tacos only by 8 o'clock at night. And then it was so funny because they said, okay, where are we going to dinner? And I was like, are you kidding me? And then we went to a restaurant and they ordered everything on the menu so they could taste it all. It was one of the best restaurants I've ever been to. White tablecloths in Tijuana. And I was like, wow, cool.
Our cat's from Tijuana.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The food scene there is incredible. And they're able to say like tacos pastor came from Lebanon to Mexico City, to Tijuana, and then to California. Like, so they know all this history. They're fascinating. I could talk to them about food forever.
I love that.
And they're all from diverse backgrounds, and they really are like, there's foodies, and then there's these who are extreme foodies.
Oh, and then also, are you planning on writing another book?
I've started work on the prequel.
Okay.
I also have learned so much to do with publishing through this that I'm thinking maybe some book about publishing might be in the works too, because it's another fascinating industry to me.
Yeah,
there's so many.
It's something I knew nothing about when I became an author, and then you learn more and more about it, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize this all.
Somebody told me before I wrote a book, they said publishing is the Wild West, and I can remember thinking, what does that even mean? Publishing is the Wild West. Then I understood, and I was like, holy cow, it is very intriguing.
Well, and also you mentioning Goodreads, like that is, I didn't know anything about that when I was writing, and they are vicious.
It's incredible. I can't believe you're saying that, because my husband is like,
I said this the last time I did a Q&A here. I brought it up too.
Really?
Because it was just, I don't know, it was just something that was the one thing I never expected.
You're not supposed to read your Goodreads.
No one told me, and here I am reading these, and I was so excited. My book came out during the pandemic, and I was so excited to like get this was something that was so close to my heart, to get people's opinions. And my book is meant to be like flipped through and enjoyed, and people just got a digital copy, read it, flipped through it, and were like, I don't like this. And then would attack me and my character.
Yeah.
Which is just like, which I'm sure you experienced.
Oh, absolutely. I did. My husband was very good though. He said, look at the big piece of the pie. Right. What percentage of people like your book? And I said, okay, last time I checked, it was like 85%. He said, okay, So anything above 50, you're good.
Well, and then
it's very rational.
And then
that
I'm
way.
sure you get this too. I've gotten people just sending me direct messages saying your book like helped me through a breakup. Your book helped me get out there. It helped, and that's why you write the book. And I know you've gotten similar feedback from other reality contestants.
I
right?
have. I got feedback from a girl who had been a contestant on The Bachelor that said you nailed so much of the anxiety that I went through. And it was so nice to read about this and to know that like someone else had experienced that and it was normal what I was experiencing. But what's really interesting is Margaret Atwood, I saw her interviewed in person. She just did a collection of short stories. I was never a Margaret Atwood fan because I had to read her in school.
Ooh, yeah,
So she was like vegetables.
Yeah.
If you have to read Margaret Atwood, I was like, oh, not such a fan. But she is recently widowed and she wrote a collection of short stories dealing with her widowhood journey. And she said such a great thing. She was being interviewed and the gentleman interviewing her said, now when you wrote, did you mean this? What were you going at? And she stopped and she said, let me tell you something. Writers write to evoke. Why don't you tell me what you felt when you read that? And I went, it's so true. So I think that's why I'm so hypersensitive about Goodread is because we really do at the end of the day, if we're honest, we write to evoke. We want that feedback. So when someone's reading going, oh, I did get one woman, but I will tell you this, mostly it's people who say I have no appreciation whatsoever for reality television. I keep going, but my book is not like you can love reality television or hate reality television and still get it out of my book. But she opened by saying, I just need to say, I loathe reality television. So I went into this book with a very negative mindset saying, I know I'm not going to like this. And then
did she like it?
She was the one that she didn't like the way I switched persons and stuff. But see, unless you get that whole interview perspective from reality television where they're always flipping around with everybody's different parachute opinion in.
Yeah, I got one that said, this would be helpful if I dated. It's a dating book. What do you mean? Why are you reading it?
So after I finished at Allure, I went back to Toronto and I was the editor of a teen magazine in Toronto. And your book with all the quizzes, those are really hard to write.
They are super hard because you have to take them. Like in addition to like writing them and coming up with them, and then also, so yeah, my book has like
Gabi's book has lots of those quizzes that you did when you were young, and you would say like, you know,
it's all like it's 20 guys, but it's 20 different types of relationships that you find anytime you're dating. And the quizzes they're like flow charts, right? To like get you through to find out if you should be like dating. Will it be different this time for the guy you always go back to, or like the relationship you always go back to? But then in addition to like making sure I was thoughtful about the questions, having the responses of giving gentle advice that's helpful to tell someone, hey, maybe this isn't going to work out
for you. Yeah.
But also telling them like, okay, this is good, but still be cautious about X, Y, and Z. Yeah, it was right.
Those are very challenging to write. So when I saw you had a book chock full of those, I was like, it was tough.
I think it came from taking so many of those quizzes as a kid.
Right.
And then also I went back to some old magazines to kind of use that as like a structure, but obviously creating all the content myself. But yeah. We flipped the interview. Now you're interviewing me.
It's true.
Okay, so your book is out right now. Everyone needs to get a copy.
Yes.
And has anyone had any other questions that came up?
What's the theme?
Ooh, it's female friendships and female interaction, which is funny because, as I said, the reality television is just the backdrop, but it's such a part of what I went through. But it's really female relationships, women relating with women.
And with themselves in a way,
and
right?
Like finding your purpose. Because someone actually gave me this great information. They said, you're born with your purpose. You will have your singular purpose from day one. Your passion will change throughout your life, but your purpose is from day one. And I do contend as a mom of 3 that we don't spend enough time in schools helping young people find their purpose. And I think that is the big, that's why I went on reality television. I really wanted my characters to explore that because some are coming back from bad relationships and whatnot. And it really is a lot of finding your purpose, grasping onto that and going with it.
Well, it's also hard to find your purpose under the title of housewife, because if the show is called Housewife, you're cast on that show because you're a wife. And then it's like, well, what is your identity outside of being a wife?
That's true too, that's a really good point, actually.
So that has to be tricky too.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Do you have any? Did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered it.
Did we cover everything?
Everything, beginning to end.
Amazing. Well, make sure you get Kara's book, and you're doing signatures, right?
Yes, I absolutely am, and I would like to say it's a easy read. It's not Proust. It's a light read.
Oh, yeah.
But I've had people tell me that if they have fallen out of the habit of reading, it's a great book for getting back in the habit of reading because of the short chapters, because of the way the different voices. And
It's a great poolside read. I read it. I read it in a week to prepare for this,
Okay.
and I couldn't put it down. It was like it started off as like
Thank
a
you.
fun read, and then I was like, wait, I need to keep reading this and
Thank
finding out. So great job.
thank you so much.
Of course. Well, all right. Thank you.
What happened?